Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Molly Cash. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the ISA. We are absolutely thrilled to be here for ISA Presents Inside the World of Writing for Television with Tawnya and Ali. Thank you, ladies. I know you've had quite a day on Zoom already, and we are just so thankful that you're here with us today. I'm really excited about this conversation, to hear about all of your experiences on these amazing shows that you've been a part of. Upcoming events, we have Max is actually doing another free class next week, breaking down Ted Lasso. If you haven't seen Ted Lasso, what are you waiting for? But really, this class is for everybody, even if you haven't seen it. It's just going to be a great class about how to break down a show. And I'm going to plug him before I say goodbye because he's not going to do it himself. He's our director of education. He is a genius when it comes to the craft of screenwriting. Ooh, I threw that word out. Uh,
Wow.
he created the craft course, the online craft course for us, which you can find at thecraftcourse.thinkific.com. And that is a course on how to write your screenplay, detailed lessons, lectures, podcasts. You buy it once, you can take it over and over again. You can work at your own pace. It's really a great value. And if you're looking for more one-on-one consulting, he also runs the Story Farm, and he takes one-on-one clients there at the storyfarm.org.
Thank you, Molly. Ironically, genius is a decent segue because I'm not a genius, but I owe a lot of the knowledge and smarts to Tawnya because you were my first real official screenwriting instructor. I obviously classes in college and stuff, but it's true. Allie and I were both in Writers Boot Camp with Tawnya as our disciplinarian.
Yes.
I owe it all to her too.
Right. And we can kind of talk about that a little bit. I mean, it's like an open-ended conversation. Obviously we're going to be talking about writing for television. Everyone on here is going to want to know the inside, scoop on what is it like to be in a writing room? How do you work your way up from staff writer? What are all the different levels? All those things in the hierarchy of a room. A lot of writers don't necessarily know firsthand, obviously, but they're also just unaware of how that works. So of course we're going to get into that, but let's just start a little with some background on both of you, aside from the 8-hour Zoom call you were just on. Oh man. Thank you obviously for jumping on after a long virtual writing room, which we'll talk about. But Allie, we'll start with you. Just give a brief background. What shows have you been on with Tawnya? How'd you get your start? And then what's going on right now?
Yeah, so let's see, the shows that we've been on, we started on Fairly Legal at USA. That was 2011. And from there, let's see if I can do it real fast. Fairly Legal, The Client List, Perception, which was on TNT, Night Shift on NBC, Famous in Love for 2 seasons on Freeform, A Million Little Things at ABC, Ginny and Georgia, and then we've done 2 mini rooms, so to speak, during COVID, one for a project at Apple. It's an Untitled Salsa project. And now we're on a project for Amazon that's also a mini room called Shelter. It's based on a Harlan Coben book series. And I actually got my start. I sort of had a career in visual effects before I started writing, and took a very long time to transition from one to the next. And yeah.
So you started taking classes with and under Tawnya roughly when?
2005 I started, and we got our first job in 2011. So it took 6 years, I guess, of just writing script after script after script, trying to get anyone and everyone to read, which, it's not that easy. Getting notes, being in writers groups, 2 years of classes with Tawnya, a 2-year program, I guess, and then more classes after that at other places. And yeah.
So out of all the students, why Allie, Tawnya?
She brought apples.
Yeah. I bribed her.
No, and it really happened very organically. It wasn't something that I thought neither one of us really thought about too much, except for maybe towards the end of teaching that 2-year program. Allie kind of started to notice that I liked darker projects a lot, and she had an idea for one. And so we talked about, she came up to me and told me, and I'm like, hey, yeah, but we were busy with other things. So that never really happened. But then I introduced Ali to some producers I was working with because I had gone to her house to hear a reading of one of the projects that she wrote. And so I got on the phone and I was like, oh my God, you would love this project. It's so great. And I pitched it, and that was like, yes, we love it. And then of course, the producing partnership, Max, you know all these people, broke up, and we went with the female of those people. And by that time I had stopped teaching, and I had moved to India for 2 years with my husband. And so it was on a trip back to LA for 3 months when Ali and I met up for lunch. And after the lunch and talking for a few hours, we went out to the parking lot and we're saying goodbye. And then Ali was like, oh wait, I wanted to ask you, have you talked to this person, this producer? And I was like, no, why? Did they say something? Because I haven't turned in my project yet. And she's like, no, but I was thinking. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Like, she did not even finish the sentence. I knew what she was going to say. And so we called the producer and we told her we wanted to do that. And she said, that sounds great. So I went back to India. We wrote the feature on Skype at the time. There was no Zoom. And it went really, really well. And by that time I had come back to the States to do I'd gotten into the Fox Writers Initiative program. And then Ali and I were meeting up and talking about, like, you know, our feature project. And then I moved to Connecticut for a while.
I didn't know that.
After 2 years in India, we went to Connecticut. And then I was like, I just gotta get out of here. So I gotta get back to LA. So we were, I think we finished that project, or we're at the tail end of it, and maybe we're doing a rewrite. And then I said, after this Fox program, I need to do another one of these, write a spec and try to get into another TV writing program. And Allie's like, I want to write a spec too. And I said, okay, well, I'm writing Nurse Jackie. Would you like to do it with me? And that's what we did. And that got us into Writers on the Verge, NBC Writers on the Verge. And that sort of started everything. But so the interesting thing is, I don't think I had been really writing TV for only a year, maybe. I'd only written one pilot and one spec, but I had done features beforehand. So we really started in features. So to launch our TV career, it was not, you know, it wasn't like slogging away trying to get into TV. We were trying to get into features. And sadly, the train had left the station and that was all fizzling out. And we didn't really know that that was what was happening at the time, but gone were the days where you would, you know, write an idea on a napkin, a cocktail napkin, and make $4 million, you know?
Yeah. And this was roughly 2010, 11-ish.
Yeah, 2010 we got into the Writers on the Verge.
The program at NBC started that fall, and then you finish in January or February or something like that, and you have, so in Writers on the Verge at NBC, you write another, like a brand new spec and a pilot in a pretty short amount of time, and then you have that material ready for staffing season. You know, back then it was very traditional. Staffing season only occurred really in the spring, so they helped you get a manager, get an agent, and kind of be ready for that. So
yeah. There are already so many questions popping into my head. So for everyone watching, if you have questions, please don't put them in the comment section because we'll probably miss them. Go down to the bottom of your screen, put them in the Q&A portion. We will have time to answer your questions, and we promise to try to get to as many of them as we can. The questions can be about anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be specifically about just what we're talking about. Obviously, we prefer that it's about TV writing. If you're having issues in relationships, that's not where we're here.
I'm really good at that, though.
she is.
Don't open that door. This could be a whole other event.
I'm going to do some tough love. Yeah.
So there are a lot of, like, I think for TV, there are a lot of vocabulary words that when you're in the TV writing world, they're just normal. For people who have not been staffed, they're not working, a lot of those words just they're not familiar. Right. So mini rooms, for one, I want to kind of talk about that, but then also just the process of getting staffed on a show, because it's one thing to go through NBC Writers on the Verge, which is amazing, and it really is a huge launchpad. But for people who don't get into writing, a lot of people don't get into that, and so they still get staffed. Yeah. So I think that process I'd like to talk about. I think let's just talk right now, because it's still fresh in the 8-hour brains of yours. A mini room. I actually have not heard of that term. So is this a new thing going on right now?
Somewhat new, you know. It basically essentially means that the show doesn't have a pickup yet, a series order yet, but they're hiring a writing staff, And they're basically asking for, it's a shorter period of time than a normal writer's room, and generally a smaller staff, wouldn't you say, than a normal writer's room, because you're not writing all the episodes, so you don't need all the people, but it's just getting a group of brains together, hiring you for a short amount of time with a showrunner to basically sketch out what a season would look like, and usually write the first few scripts. So if you already have a pilot, maybe you write episode 2, 3, 4, or 2 and 3 or whatever. And then after the mini room's done, they would decide if they're going to pick up the series. So
now, is it a guarantee that you're going to be staffed on the remainder of the show?
No, because
No.
we may not even be available. I mean, I think we would be on both these mini rooms if we were available and came back, but that's the problem with it. It's a way, I guess, to spend less money for these, mostly streaming platforms that are doing it, and they will do this room, have this sort of proof of concept, go pay to have the pilot shot, see what the pilot looks like in the dailies, and then if they're like, "Ooh, this is great," they're like, "Great, we've got 3, sort of scripts in the can. Let's go start shooting those. Get the writers' room together ASAP, and let's break the rest of the season." And maybe they'll start shooting again in a month or so.
There's
yeah.
always been like pilot pickup orders though, so that like that isn't any different. But
No.
but that I don't remember them hiring a staff of writers to get into a room to do that though, right? It was just, here's the pilot, they pick it up.
The way it usually works is for like mostly network season is that they'll, you go out, you pitch a pilot, they pick the pilots that they want to, the pitches that they want to buy, then that writer or those writers will write the outline and then the draft, and then the scripts that they like, they'll choose from those to like actually shoot the pilots. The rest of those are then dead. They'll shoot the pilots and then they'll decide out of that which ones are they gonna pick up, and that's when they go to upfronts and get all the advertising.
Right.
And then off they go. So then after they've done the sort of, they've decided we're going to pick up the pilot to series, then they start staffing the writer's room
Right.
for that. And then you're just in there doing like all the other episodes, whether they picked you up for, usually it's like, so 12 more episodes, and then they'll decide if they're after that, when it's starting to air on TV, if they're going to keep going because the numbers are good. And they'll pick up the back 9. Although those orders are far and fewer between now. Shows that used to be like 22 episodes on network television, sometimes they're only doing a 13 episode order, and maybe a 10 even. They're just like, that's it. It's like TV's changing so quickly, and I think that's mostly because streaming platforms have come out with these 10 episodes, 8 episodes, or even 6 now, and they're dropping them all at once. And viewers, it's just the taste change, the things change, but networks are now buying and year round, and I think they've been talking about doing that for years, and buying and shooting year round, but COVID sort of started to force that hand, because
Well, and so did the amount of money that Netflix and Amazon and Apple and all these play. It's just insane. Oddly enough, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like that's technically development money that's being paid to develop a show beyond just a writer or two that writes a pilot, network picks it up and then goes like, they're actually spending development money.
it really is development. Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. Yeah.
Which is, in a way, it's a good sign that they're willing to do that. That was not really happening for a while.
True, it is, but at the same time, like, that's a very positive way of looking at it, and I'm gonna have to process that. But the negative way of looking at it is like, not committing, and then you're not on a show definitely for 20 weeks or maybe even more when it gets extended, because that's where you're like, you've got a job for that 5 months or maybe 7 months, and now you have a job for 6 weeks or 10 weeks, and you're not getting paid to produce it because you're not producing the show yet, so you're getting a lot less fee. So it's definitely, people are feeling like it's getting harder to cobble together a living with the situation.
Yeah, and the other sort of negative, which we touched on a little bit, is like, for example, the Salsa project that we were on finished in September. Apple still hasn't decided whether or not they're picking it up. So, and who knows what will happen with this one that we're on now, but it won't be anytime soon. So because writers' schedules are all over the place, when it does come back, and let's say they do pick it up to series and they're hiring a writing staff 6 months from now, we may or may not be available, like you said. And so it feels like the networks or the streaming platforms or whatever are just saying, oh, we can replace the writing staff with other writers and it's no big deal. Even though we're the ones who conceived of and designed the season, we won't be around to get paid to write it. You know what
There's
I mean?
got to be like guild restrictions or something. I feel like there's legal stuff that's involved.
Well, the guild is going to have to take up this issue the next go around when it's time to negotiate for contracts, because
Yeah.
it's problematic. And yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons though. It's like if you're in a bad room, then you know it's really short. You don't have to stay there for 7 months.
I mean, the obvious pro for everyone watching is that you guys got a job. I mean, you know, everybody watching right now, not everybody, I don't know, but most of us have not been staffed on a show. So once you get into that world of trying to, you know, work freelance, because that's basically what you're doing, it can get stressful, because what if you fall in love with a show that you just like, oh gosh, you can't just keep your schedule open for the next year and a half to hopefully get staffed on that show.
Not if you want to eat, Max. Not if you want to eat.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. Well, I mean, that's a lot of really interesting information. Hopefully everything works out for all of you. And this is, you know, I'm just looking at the comments to make sure I'm not missing anything. We do love hearing where everybody's from. I think it's really neat to see. We've got Hong Kong and Taipei and
Oh my God. Wow.
all over the world. And for those of you, you know, where it might be like 4 a.m, a huge thank you for tuning in. Let's see, going back to the questions, I haven't really even hit this. So I do kind of want to know, this is just a fun, easy question, but we'll start with Allie. What are you watching right now? And do you even have time to watch TV? But what are you watching and do you like it? What's going on?
Well, right at the moment, Mayor of Easttown, which I think everybody's probably watching.
Not yet.
Yeah, I'll skip that and talk about like the last thing I really loved and flipped for was Queen's Gambit.
It's amazing.
And just everything about it I loved.
Yeah, God, and it's hard to look at shows like that sometimes, because the photography and the wardrobe and makeup and all of that is something that writers don't necessarily have any control over, but boy, did it come out well. But Tawnya.
Well, I would agree with that. I mean, I watched both of those things. The last thing I really thought was amazing was that same show. Watching Mayor of Easttown, I think it's Kate Winslet's amazing. There's a lot of great things about that show. The police procedural beats are terrible. They're not good. They're not good. I'm also watching, I mean, oh gosh, what have I watched? I'm watching, because I'm taking my time doing it, Search Parties. I'm behind the 8 ball on that. I just started watching Cruel Summer.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's cool. I think that's pretty good. I mean, I'm not very far into it. And
are you watching shows just for entertainment, or are you actually like, this is kind of my job, I need to stay up to speed and know what's going on?
Well, the Cruel Summer, I decided I needed to watch some YA shows because I'm not a YA writer. Like, we're not YA writers. I mean, that's not how we see ourselves and brand ourselves. We just happen to get on a YA show and then got on another YA show and are now on their 3rd YA show. But it's not because we've never written a YA sample. So I thought I better watch some YA shows. That's the reason why. I like to watch for entertainment, you know, if I can. That's my preference, to just like lose myself as well, like everybody else wants to do. But I do watch things. I do sometimes go, let me watch this an episode or 2 just to see what's out there.
Yeah. I've tried. Yeah, it's hard because you just, when you're in the world every single day, it's hard not to notice what's working, what's not. And it's like, oh God. But like for me, Resident Alien was the perfect show to watch, because I just did not care if it was structurally sound or it was just so ridiculous. And Alan Tudyk is so funny that I was so glad I found that show, because I'm like, oh, thank God, I can just, I don't care if this is any good. It's so stupid, but wonderful.
Right.
And then it's, of course, a whole bunch of Discovery Plus shows that I just waste my time on.
Somebody asked, what's YA? Young adult.
Young adult. And, you know, it's actually kind of a good segue, because I'm sure a lot of people watching are like, if you never wrote a YA spec, you've never wrote on a YA show, how did you get hired? How did that happen?
Well, I mean, I think that basically it's just, you know, when you're starting out, you definitely, and they always do. I mean, it changes, the rules change every 5 minutes. Like, they want you to have a sample that represents what you do, what you kind of shows you want to be on. But I think when you're a newer writer, they kind of want you to match the show more to make sure you can write for that voice. And then when you're a little more seasoned, they feel like, okay, you know what you're doing, you've had a lot of experience, you'll be fine, like, right? So, I mean, I guess the sample that we had that got on that first YA show was, the woman was probably in her mid-20s. So she was like she was young, but not like a super young adult. I guess she was, more in the vein of like the Age of the Bold type girls, but it was a much darker show. And then the show that's gotten us on other YA shows is about sex surrogates. And it's all grown-ups. And it's just not the thing that you would ever think somebody would put you on a YA show from that project.
I'm curious how many, this is a random question. How many shows have you turned down?
Well, I think sometimes we have to turn down things because we're on a show and some people will come and be like, hey, are the girls available for this? And we're not. Sometimes that will happen, like, and you're like, oh, but I really wanted to be on that show. And other times it's because we just are like, that's not what we want to do right now. So I don't know if there's a count for it, but there's definitely just, I think a lot of times we've turned down network, like really meat and potatoes network shows, which you could view as stupid because it's really good money, but it's just like not what we wanted to do creatively. Although there are times like maybe right now we would do it, it just depends on where we're at in our lives. And
so Allie, is it kind of like you want to shape your career by the choices of shows that you get staffed on?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I think what Tawnya said, like in the beginning, it's just so freaking hard to get a job that you take kind of whatever you can get, and most people do anyway. And then you accumulate these credits, which they then judge you on and decide that you can only write that. Yeah. So you get to a point where you realize, oh, we have to be very selective. And if you really want to try to do something different and get on different types of shows, you have to write a new sample showing that you can do that thing or whatever. Yeah. So, but even when you do that, sometimes the credits speak a little louder than whatever your samples are to some executives.
And I can I pipe in on that? Because I feel like we have struggled because we got into Writers on the Verge. They tell you to like pitch out 5 pilots that you would want to write. And then they pick the one. And honestly, it just wasn't the one that really represents us the way we want to be represented. So that's the kind of, that got us like these lighter sort of jobs. And then we're like, what? This isn't us. And then it was like, oh, you really have to have, because we hadn't done TV a lot. So we didn't know what the rules were. But now it's like, I would say those of you who are writing pilots to get staffed or to even like enter contests and fellowships and then hopefully get staffed, like write things that are similar to the shows you actually really want to be on. So for us, then we started working and got busy and we didn't have time to write pilots. So it's taken us a very long time to slowly start to, roughly reflect the kind of shows we would want to be on and that we would do. So I always say that out of everything we've been on, and I have watched a little bit of everything, and I will admit I don't watch a lot of the shows that we're on, but I think Salsa would be the closest that we would watch, like outside of not working on it.
Well, that's exciting.
And I think for me, and I had this big conversation with someone the other night, that like I think of success in those terms. People think of success as like, you're a working writer, you have all these credits, you've done all these things. But in my mind, I feel like I could die happy. I don't want to die though. If we had worked on Mad Men or 6 Feet Under or Sopranos or something that like we revere and respect. But then there are times when it's just like, I don't care. Let's just be a white writer. Let's just take whatever job. It doesn't matter. Let me sell out and just make the money. You know what I mean? Like I waver between the art and commerce personally, internally all the time.
Well, and from like a staffing position, when you're not writing your own original pilot, you don't really have that much control if you're writing on the next Mad Men. It's kind of like what's offered to you, right?
Yeah. And it's like Mad Men, no one knew was going to be Mad Men.
Yeah.
And they didn't know that it was going to be that. And then once it was that, good luck getting on that show because everybody wanted to be on that show. Maybe if you got on Succession early on, but not everybody, like then, all the high level sort of, entertainment people want to work on those shows too. So then the competition becomes crazy. So you don't really know what's going to happen to something that you're on. Sometimes there's a great script that everyone thought was going to be amazing and a big hit, and it isn't. So
Yeah.
sure.
I'm trying to think of a segue into the next set of questions here, but I think the whole segue is just TV in general, but I'm trying to speak to everybody who's watching, because I'm sure everyone's like, this is all really excellent information. And it is like, all of this is like, I'm so glad we're talking about this. But again, for all of you who are still striving to even just get noticed, I know a lot of writers are asking, what should I be writing right now? And is it purely original pilots? Should I just be focusing on speccing? Like, what needs to be in somebody's arsenal in today's day and age?
Minimum 2 really killer pilots, but I will say with my company, because I run a company called Script Anatomy, it's a TV and feature writing company. It's mostly focused on TV, and we tell our writers to have at least 2 pilots, but many of them, because they've taken many classes and then they've built up their repertoire, they'll have 3, 4, and even 5 pilots before they go out. Now, that doesn't mean that all 5 of those are amazing, but probably 2 of those are really strong, and the other 3 can be dusted up and made better so that they're coming to the table with more material. Whereas Ali and I had like 1 pilot and that was it. And then we're like scrambling to write the next thing. It'd be great to have that. It would also be great to have like a short story or an essay that was a personal thing or that showed something different maybe than the pilots that you have. So you can show a different style of writing or different genre. What did you say?
Or a play.
Or a play or a short film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then a couple of the fellowships still require specs, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to apply for the fellowships, then writing a spec of an existing show.
Correct.
And if you don't know what the fellowships are, everyone, you just Google what are the screenwriting fellowships, honestly, and they'll all come up. And I think all of them are free. Virtually every studio has one. NBC Writers on the Verge is obviously one of those fellowships. Jen Grisanti, I think, is still teaching. Is she?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Warner Brothers Writers Workshop, ABC Disney Fellowship Writing Program, CBS Writing Program,
Nickelodeon,
Writers Initiative, Nickelodeon, HBO Access. And then now I feel like there's more and more bubbling up.
You used to have like regular panels talking about the fellowships, didn't you?
I still do, but
Oh, you still do?
Yeah, it's for our bio essay fellowship workshop. Every year that we do that, then we always do a fellowship panel. And because we have so many writers in fellowships every year, we usually have just our in-house people who are alumni who got into fellowships on the panel. And then I have one year done it with all the heads of the programs, but it's such a hard thing to wrangle. And I did them individually rather than having them all do it together. I did it individually because I thought that would be cool. They'll just completely get to talk about their thing. But
yeah, I tell everybody, and I plug Script Anatomy all the time. If you want to be writing a TV, you should be taking classes with Script Anatomy. Honestly, I'm not even doing that to try to blow smoke. You guys are good. You're really good. It's really, I think it's the best TV writing, workshop program that's available. It's weird to say in LA because now it's like you're all online now, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, we have our own space, right? But we 5 weeks into using it, COVID hit. So I've just been paying the lease on that without having a single body in the place. And then we put everything on Zoom. We were already teaching online. Thank God I had started the online part of it a couple years before. And then when COVID hit, I was like, well, we just got to put everything online. And so now I think we have like 7 or 8 Zooms, and they're just all on that. But we would like to maybe start going back in person a little bit in the fall. But what we discovered is we're going to keep our full curriculum online. But yes, I think we are the best, let's just say. And because the proof is in the pudding. I mean, the situation is if you look at this TV screen, you are going to see Script Anatomy alumni's names coming up. And like there's writers that are at higher level than me now. Like, and Ali and I are the second top level that you can be, which is a co-executive producer. And so we have EPs and people that are sold their own shows. And like Selena was created by Moises Zamora, who's a client. And Claudia Forestieri just has her show just got picked up to series. It's Gordita Chronicles. So, and there's more, but fellowship wise and how many people we've had staffed at every single level, I don't think there's anybody that beats us. And I also say, and sorry, I'm just going to plug my school for a minute.
Let's do it.
But I also say, like, why would you spend, whatever it is, 40,000, 30,000, 60,000, whatever it is a year on a writing program? That is not what's going to get you any jobs. It doesn't matter. I didn't have an MFA or a BFA in writing. It's all about doing the work and getting the training. It is more of a trade school type of thing. And then, getting better at it and building your contacts and network and all of that.
Well, for TV writing, especially, Ellie, maybe you can talk about it a little bit. This is kind of a segue into just talking about the process of breaking a story. I'm skipping some good questions, but I see that we have we have 29 questions in the queue right now. And I do want to get to those, but TV, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's much more formulaic than a feature film is. There's a very real process to act breaks, and how you break all that down is a little bit more of a formatted approach in some regards. I mean, I'm generalizing. So point being, you should be taking classes to learn how to break that down and see how other people do it and understand that, because there's a lot more that goes into writing a show than most writers think.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would say structure is important in features and in TV, and it is different, obviously, and it's the same things are important. Like a main character on television has to be somebody that you want to come back and watch either every week if it's on network, or if you want to get an audience to stream a show in 7, 10, 12, whatever episodes like that. The characters really, I think, are just so essentially important. So yeah, but in terms of breaking a story, I mean, in a writer's room, basically the way it works is that, well, if you have a person who kind of is running the show that does it properly, or we would say properly, you start out with your writing staff and you're taking that 30,000 foot view, right? That bird's eye view of what this season is going to be. So usually you're starting with a pilot script. Maybe it's shot, maybe it's not, and that obviously makes a difference too. But so you have a set of conflicts and goals for your character and characters already in that episode number 1. And then let's say you have 10 episodes. So you just start with very broad strokes of where you want to go in those 10, where you see the season ending, maybe. Conceptually, are you delivering on the conceit or whatever? And then you would start with the per character. So you design a character arc in the most broad strokes for each character. Then you start to sort of slot in on those 10 episodes what the major milestones would be for those arcs. And you just do that, and you slowly but surely narrow it down until you get to episode 2. And then it's like coming up with storylines for that episode separately, then how you feather it together. So it's like just going from broad view to narrow view to granular to the scenes until you break an episode, meaning you've got all the beats on the board in the right order, what the scenes are going to be. Usually the staff, whoever, at that point, once you have that, it would get assigned to an individual writer or entity like us, we're a team. Then that person would pitch it out verbally a couple times. Once the showrunner signs off on that, then it's off to outline, and that single writer or entity will take it from there and sort of take ownership of it for outline and all the notes for that and for the script.
Never write without an outline. That is your blueprint. You need to have that. And without doing all the development and having a really strong outline, there's no point in writing the script. It's a house of cards that could easily just fall apart. And it's something that you'll just have to keep rewriting. And I think our goal at Script Anatomy is always to develop everything really solidly and keep reworking things until you get to the outline, and then you rework the outline and get it to the point where it's okay, it's ready to be scripted, because you just who likes rewriting things 5,000 times? You just get lost in the weeds of it, and you forget what your goal was with the story.
Yeah, just by how you broke that down, Allie, I think it emphasizes so much the importance of educating yourselves for everyone watching, for every single writer, that you have to be able to, I mean, it's just a practice after a while. The more often you shoot a free throw, the better at it you'll become. But it's also that ability of seeing everything from that bird's eye view and at a granular level at the same time. And if you haven't been writing a ton of scripts and you haven't been really putting that time in to develop your own craft, you're much less just the overall craft of how story works, it's going to be really difficult and slow going for you to be able to go through that process, but you have to. We all had to deal with that. I don't get it from this level, I don't get it from that level. Well, you have to work through it.
Yeah. Should I answer a couple of these questions that are popping up?
Are you seeing the questions in?
I'm seeing them in the Q&A.
Oh, you are? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So I'm going to go from the bottom.
Okay.
Yes, we will keep all classes moving virtually forward. We'll keep them online, and then we'll expand back out in person. Has there been a particular pilot feature short that stuck out to you during staffing season that worked, didn't work for hiring, and did it stick out? And this kind of goes back to somebody else's question earlier, which is like, what do you suggest to spec? And it is always something that's going to be attention grabbing. So when you're to go first with specs, you don't want to spec something that's just like necessarily on network television, right? You want to spec something that is that grabs you in the same way that when you're watching television. So like, for example, if you write a Succession, that spec is going to stand out more than a Amsterdam script. You know what I mean? Because it's like there are bigger, bolder character choices, bigger, bolder set pieces that are just like, oh my God, that happened. I can't believe it. Twists and turns and things like that. So I think it's always, I would avoid for the most part network. And instead of maybe if you were going to do like a This Is Us, maybe avoid doing things that are like 10 years old, 5 years old. Make sure everything that you're speccing is on the air currently. When it comes to pilots that stand out, it's always, as the story that grabs you, obviously it's well written, and it's the voice of the writer and what they have to say. It's kind of hard to narrow it down to like one thing. It's got to be an amazingly well written script, but then it also has to be an incredible story and have characters that you're like, just don't want to keep turning the page. So there's not really one element. And that's why I think writing well is difficult, because there's so many elements that have to come together, so many ingredients that have to be there to make it a special script.
Yeah. And really, you're going to come to that by writing more scripts, just by churning them out, because it's just practice. I remember I was with our former representative at Writers Boot Camp one time. This was 11 years ago. One of his friends was out with us at a bar, and I heard his friend, he was a producer, talking to this girl that had just moved to LA. She wanted to be a writer. And I heard him tell her, you're not a screenwriter until you write 10 screenplays. And I was like, fuck, dude, that is an asshole thing for you to say to this person who just came into town. I understand what he meant, though, is that you really don't get a feel for who you are as a writer until you really churn out those drafts and understand the process. But you're a writer if you're writing, but I understood what you were saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do think you kind of have to put in your 10,000 hours.
Right.
I really do. I think it's everybody that I've seen become successful that I knew before they were, whether it's mostly it's people that I've taught, they are writing and rewriting and working on the next script, and then working on a feature and working on another pilot. It just takes that kind of, discipline. You're not going to get it right the first time. It's you can go back to that script, but maybe if you work that one same script for 3 years, it can get to that point. But
then you're putting all your script eggs in one script basket.
Yeah, exactly.
It really is like the 10,000 hours thing, though. It's like if you want to get good at anything, it requires, whether it's playing the piano or a sport, you got to go play the games and the tournaments and the whatever, or do your practice. I mean, it's wonderful to hear that the brilliant, wonderful, genius, successful writers that we all look up to had to do it too. Mm-hmm. And also write shitty first drafts, and lots.
And even when you're a seasoned writer, you're writing a shitty first draft sometimes, because like every pilot is different. Like some pilots will just come to you more easily, and other ones you're like banging your head against the wall and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to crack this code. Right. And I was talking to a friend of mine last night that I really respect, and he was like, yeah, I'm putting that one to bed. I think it's unsolvable. It's just problematic. I'm like, okay, I'm sure it's solvable, but he doesn't feel that way right now. And until he does, he won't pick that back up. Someone asked, does it make it easier or harder to get work having a writing partner in TV? Allie?
That's a great question. I mean, I feel like we've been asked that in the past, and I don't really know what the answer is, because our manager and our agents don't really tell us why we don't, I don't even think necessarily they know why we do or don't get a job. I mean, sometimes more or less, but sometimes the people doing the hiring aren't really honest about, well, you know, the reason. So we don't know which jobs we have gotten or not gotten based solely on the fact that we're a team. Sometimes, you know, two heads, two brains for the price of one is obviously an asset if it's a smaller show with a smaller budget and somebody feels like, oh, it's, you know, let's get bang for our buck. But
are you paid as one writer?
Yes.
You are.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I think like if it's a smaller room, we might have a better chance because they need more bodies, but they can't afford them. So then that might help you more. If it's a big staff, I have known staffs that have had like a couple, like I think there was friends of ours that our team wrote on a staff with like 3 or 2 different writers teams or whatever. And that we have done that too once, and that actually twice now. That happens sometimes. But I don't think I don't know. I think it's hard to get work regardless, basically.
Yeah.
Someone asked, with everything changing due to the pandemic, do you think a writer has to live in LA to be staffed on a TV show now? Which is a great question.
And then how to get staffed. A lot of people ask, do you need an agent in order to get staffed? I usually tell them, yeah, you do.
Yeah, if you don't have an agent, usually the way you do it is by becoming a writer's assistant or a script coordinator, or, you know, writer's PA on a show, you know, working your way up on a show in those positions. We've known people that have gotten staffed that way who don't have an agent or manager, and then usually they quickly get one.
Yeah,
they're able to
right.
The last 2 rooms we've been on have had, this one in particular has a writer in New York, yep. And then the other one had one of the showrunner was in New York. The rest of the writers were here, and the 2 creators were in Colombia. So I personally believe that I mean, everyone has a different opinion, and I don't really know. So I'm just going to say what I think, which is that I think you definitely right now you can live somewhere else and be in a writer's room. And I think that might be the case more and more because of COVID and Zoom. I think more time is wasted in a room than it is on Zoom. And I think like they're saving money on renting the place that you're there every day, all the desks, all the furniture, all the equipment, all the paper. They're not paying for your lunch anymore. They're not paying for your parking. All that stuff has to be paid for. So I feel like there might be, like if you're Shonda Rhimes and you want to have an in-person writer's room, then you'll have that. But I don't think it's going to be an option for everybody.
And really, that's kind of going across the board for every industry. Like people are saving a fortune not having to have a brick and mortar office. I mean, it's a really weird changing world. There are a lot of questions, everybody, that I see in the Q&A that we've already answered. So please, you know, don't be offended if we skip over the one that you specifically asked, but there are a lot of things about, you know, working as a writing team. This is a quick little question and answer, but back nines, what does that mean?
So that's sort of a term that's used more for network series orders. So usually if they're, you know, if you get a full season on network, it tends to be 22 to 24 episodes. And what they'll do is usually order the first 13, which usually takes you up to like what, the holidays or January, and there's some sort of natural break in their schedule. And if the numbers have been good, then they'll pick up what they call the back 9. After the 13, it's 9 more episodes that air in the spring.
Yeah.
Got it.
Someone asked if YA, young adult, is the equivalent of PG-13. No, I don't think it always is. I think there's definitely edgy, R-rated teen shows. So there's probably a gamut.
Yeah. Let's see, I'm trying to find some other ones that we haven't already. Let's see, Joe Beatty is asking, I've been told even if you write a spec that is bought by a streamer, technically speaking, that would be an original pilot, not a spec, correct? We just
Exactly.
the chances of you becoming a showrunner is a non-starter, depending on where you are in your career, Joe. I mean, right now, that's what you both want. You want to be running your own show. Yeah.
If we sell a show, we'll be running our own show.
Yeah.
Likely, it would be very unlikely that it wouldn't, although there could be a situation where they're like, because we're females and, you know, men can just do things without having the previous training sometimes. I think that we might have to, there could be a situation, in the right situation, where they would say, you need to have somebody with you the first season. probably that wouldn't happen to us at this level, but if you're a new writer who sells a show, you're absolutely going to have a showrunner. You don't know what you're doing, right? There's so much to learn. And by the way, there's a lot to learn when you become a showrunner, but at least you have some understanding of the process and what's happened along the way. But even then you're being thrown into the fire, because it's just a big job and there's no real proper training, even in the showrunner training program. I mean, I don't know, we haven't done it. But I still, like, there's nothing that beats like having to actually do the job. So as much as you can be armed with some information, it's like the actual having to do it and stick to a schedule. And one other thing is, like, being a good leader and manager. I would say most people are not good leaders and managers. They think they are, but it's like, just because you've gotten to that level doesn't mean you know how to manage people or manage a show or know how to be a leader or be comfortable in that position of power. A lot of people act weird in the position of power because they don't know how to handle it. And you're not given any training course. Like, everybody should have to go to managerial training courses. Like, it is a corporate world, so it would behoove them to send people to training, and who wouldn't want that? You want to set yourself up for the best possible scenario.
Every show is like its own little business, and so you've got the hierarchy of the corporate people. And shoot, I had a segue. Oh yeah, it's like sometimes even, Joe, if you sell a show, you might just get a non-writing EP credit and you're not writing on the show at all. In some ways it could be good for you. Like, okay, I sold the show and I'm going to move on to something else.
Yeah.
If it's a baby, you should try to work with your representation. Like, well, at least let me get in as a staff writer or a consultant producer or something. But that's a good point though, because he's like writing staff, but not hire. The likelihood of you going, actually, that's a topic we didn't cover. Hierarchy of the staff. So just start from the bottom and go up.
Yeah, so it starts with staff writer. That's the sort of entry-level writing position. Staff writer, oh my God, story editor, executive story editor, co-producer, producer, supervising producer, co-executive producer. Sorry, I'm really tired. And then
consulting producer is sort of like a floater position that you could be before or after you've been a co-executive producer, and then an executive producer. But co-executive producer and executive producer can be switched back and forth, because you might not always be the EP of the show. And I actually just looked at somebody's credits today where I was like, oh, they were an EP for like three times, but now they're a co-EP again. And they weren't running most of those shows that they were on. And if not running the show, you may end up being like the number 2 or just another co-executive producer on the show.
Is executive producer just another term for showrunner, or is that?
There can be more than one EP, so you can have a showrunner and a couple other EPs, or another EP who are show running, or you can have 2 people who are EPs and showrunners. But yeah, showrunner is sort of an EP and the showrunner.
Okay, right. See, this is all really valuable stuff. Or this is what happens when you tune in to pay attention on webinars. Okay, let's see. We have, we'll say 15 minutes left. What kind of spec would you write now to attract attention now or get staff? We kind of talked about that, but with reference to genre, you want to be writing the type of show that you'd like to staff on.
Absolutely. And they can really show off your skills too. It's like, this seems very obvious, but you want to pick a well-written show,
Yeah, right. And actually, there was a really good point that Tawnya made about the types of shows that allow you to make some really big choices or take some chances in your script. Because there are some scripts that I don't even know if that happens anymore, but they used to have like stunt specs where you write some ridiculous version of the show that would never get made just to try to get noticed. Does anybody even do that anymore?
Yes, somebody did that a few years ago. I want to say with the Seinfeld spec. Like I remember it going around a few years ago. So yes, if you can do something that's like amazing, great, right? And I'll always remember, Max, I don't know if you remember this story, but when we were at our former
the Charlie Brown.
Yeah, exactly what I was going to say. So do you want to tell them about the Charlie Brown?
It was a stunt spec that went around where everybody was, all the Peanuts were older and like in their 20s or something. And most of them were like down and out and really hurting, alcoholics or, it was dark.
But it got Heather Hatch wrote it, if I feel like it was the name. I think I'm right about that. I could be wrong. And it got her like meetings with everybody in town and launched her career.
There was one for Full House where the two twins got their period for the first time, and everybody was like, I need to read that. That's never actually going to go to air, but yeah.
So
we are not recommending you go do this, but
right.
If you have a really great idea for something, and then you can really knock it out. Let's see here. Ashok. Let's see. If he's Washington, staying in US, how do I approach Netflix or Amazon or any other platform producing shows for an Indian market? Is even possible? Do I need to go to Mumbai?
Well, there is Netflix India, and that's probably a great first. That's a great place to start, just because they set up camp there not that long ago, and I've heard through the grapevine they are producing more and more content. They want to, and there's 1 billion people there, so obviously they can get the eyeballs on things, and then outside of there as well. You always need to go in through an agent, a manager, or a producer, like a producing pod, a production company with an overall deal, a pod. You're not going to be able to just like write to somebody. And I will say this, like, people reach out to me on LinkedIn all the time, and I just started to not answer because there was too many people saying, like, when they would see my credit from Apple or Netflix especially, hey, I have this idea, do you want to take it? No, it's not the kind of writing producers that Ali and I are, right? So that's a different thing.
Yeah. It's always a tough question, because that's whatever we all want, that, right? We all want to get access to somebody. And it really just, you have to hit the ground and knock down doors and reach out to people and see what happens. I mean, what else would you do? Obviously there are fellowships, there are contests, there are a whole bunch of ways that you can gain access to people so that they can read your projects. But the ISA has literally 100,000 plus people in our overall network, and we're all trying to figure out a way how do you knock down a door? It's fellowships are tricky, because it's like, yeah, apply for the fellowships, but boy, you really need to take them seriously, because you have the best of the best who are undiscovered trying to get in, and it usually takes them 2 or 3 years. Did you get in the first try?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, we do know a lot of people who get in after 3, 4, 5 years of trying. So definitely don't give up if you've applied. And they'll keep track of you. They'll keep track of you if you've, because maybe they have 1,000 submissions, but they have a top 100, and then they, whittle it down to 8 or whatever. They're not going to forget the names of the 90 that didn't get in that year. So it's definitely keep trying.
Yeah. How important are TV Bibles?
Oh my God, not. Everyone thinks that they need to write a TV Bible to sell a show. You need to write a pitch to sell a show. I have never been on a show where maybe one show. No, I don't even think so. Have you, Ellie, actually had a Bible? I've never seen a Bible in my life. Except for the one.
Even when you're considering, do you help staff, or is it just the showrunner, executive producers that are staffing?
We have not, but sometimes co-EPs do. But we haven't been co-executive producers for that long. I think.
And it's also the studio and the network and the pod that they all help staff.
Okay. So a pitch deck is really more to try to get representation. If somebody expresses interest in something, you might flip through a Bible, but it's really more, for live action, it's the script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody's asking, what if the show is based on a book series? Bible then? No, we're actually working on a show that's based on a series now too, or book series as well. There's a trilogy so far, and I don't know how that one actually came about, but we actually just pitched out the entire first season of the show, and it's really kind of more like a pitch deck. I guess you could call it sort of a semi-Bible. It's just as far as like, these are the story areas, or these are the episodes we're going to cover all the way through.
Yeah, I think the way that one went, because it's a Harlan Coben book series, like Amazon bought the IP before, and then found a writer to write the pilot. And so probably a bunch of writers came in with their take, how they would adapt the book. They hire a writer to write the pilot, and then they've picked it up to this mini room. I guess they picked it up to pilot, then hiring a mini room. And then to do what Tawnya just explained, it was sort of the verbal 20-minute, this is what all the episodes will be, together with a graphic sort of pitch deck that these days when you pitch on Zoom, everybody uses visual, or I guess most people. use visuals to go along with your pitch. So feels like we're seeing so many more snazzy, amazing graphic designer decks than we used to.
I spent some money on mine, man. I'm like,
You have to. It's like, I mean, it takes a professional to be able to turn out, you know.
Well, you did a pretty professional job for ours, I think. So
I tried, but I don't think it was. But it was free. It didn't cost
so
us.
then maybe that's where we have to get the vernacular right. Pitch deck and Bible, two different things.
Yes. So a pitch deck would be like a 10, 12, 15 page like PDF with mostly visuals with a few little bits of text here and there to explain the concept and the characters and, you know, things like that. A Bible is, you know, every piece of information that you could possibly think of, usually just written, right? I don't know. I've never seen one. Like we said, it's an exclusive thing, but I think it's just written.
In order to sell your show or get it noticed, you don't need the Bible. It's a pitch book, pitch deck, whatever you want to call it. I think it's a good distinction to make, because the pitch deck still involves some of your show information, of course, log lines, one-page synopsis, characters, you know, descriptions, etc. But that's a whole other webinar to talk about what would go into a Bible and not. But that was the point I was going to make. If you're writing animation, I've been told by everybody, you don't even need the script. Just really amazing pitch deck. Wow. And really sell it. It's, you know, mine is like 19, 20 pages, and it really tells the whole story with the visuals, because it's more about the imagery and the story that you're trying to sell. That doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't write the pilot. You know, a lot of people might go, oh, then I don't have to write the script. Great. I'm just going to come up with a bunch of animated shows, which animation's really huge right now. So maybe that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Those are pretty much all the questions. There are a whole bunch of other topics that we could cover, but maybe like one or two liner type of advice when you're trying to outline and develop your show. I mean, well, that's a huge question, but when you're you have an idea, what do you do first? We'll go with Tawnya. If you have, obviously you talk to Ali about it, but.
Yes. I talked to Ali about it. What are you asking? If we just, where do we start once we have an idea?
Outside of an idea, I suppose how many original projects are you working on right now?
Well, we're working on a pilot right now, which is interesting because we actually started that with it started with an idea based on a book. It was about a true story about a woman called Julia Pastrana, who was living in the mid 1800s and had hypertrichosis. So she was covered head to toe in hair. So that's something that stands out. Have you seen that show before? It may not be something that ever gets made, but it's like an unusual, interesting character. And she was a woman who spoke like 4 languages and could sing and dance and ended up being in the circus and being a sideshow freak, right? So that's kind of like the concept or the beginning of the seed of the idea. And then we read a book and then we researched it and then we just like start talking about characters and who we want. We actually wrote a short story on that first and then decided to build it out into a pilot because we thought it's different and it's unusual. We like to start with worlds, like unique worlds, and that's not always easy to do, but then somebody will do it and you go, oh yeah, there still are unique worlds. But for example, Big Love, which takes place in the world of polygamy, or a freak show, right, in the 1800s, or we're very interested in 1930s, and 40s film, like the world in Hollywood, right? But that's not, nobody wants you to do the inside Hollywood story. But we try to find like unique worlds and subcultures, like we are interested in cults and things like that. And that's kind of where we often start, or we'll say like, we need a sample. We need something family show type of sample. Okay, what will that be? How can we put that in an interesting world so it's not just a family show? And that's where we kind of came up with this sex surrogate pilot, because it was a weird and strange world. And we decided that we found out there was a couple who actually did the work. And we thought, that's interesting, like having sex with other people to take them through, this series of Masters and Johnson steps to help them recover and heal from their traumas. And being married to somebody else who's also doing the same work with other people, like how does that work?
So it's like you were saying, Ellie, it's looking at the 30,000-foot view first.
Yeah.
You're testing the concept. Is this even something that's worthwhile?
It's so true. You know, these days, that idea of having a big hook or having a big, you know, having a high concept seems to be more and more important. People have piles of scripts on their desk to read. There's so much more content out there. There's so many more, you know, with all the streaming platforms and that kind of thing. It's like, how are you going to make your material stand out? And maybe it's a character, that maybe that high hook is embedded within a character. Maybe it's a world, like Tawnya just said. Maybe it's, you know, some fresh take on a genre. Whatever it is, it can be, you know, maybe it's even like, I don't know, a theme that's just unique and different. It's going to stand out. But it has to be some element of your story has to be hooky.
Yeah, unique. Winona Earp. I love the Earp stories.
Right. So like, this is kind of somebody's pitch deck. Now they're probably verbally saying more than what you're seeing on the pitch deck, right? And maybe they'll leave this pitch deck behind, but this is like, it's beautiful, right? Everyone has a past, created by Emily Andres. Those that do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So they have some old guy from the past.
So there's tone in there.
Right, there's tone in there.
Yeah.
No, this is my time now. It's history that's doomed. So like, I'm just sort of scrolling through it for you guys, but there's like a character page where we're talking about Winona Earp and her character, and there's a really cool visual, and it's all her storyline and probably what happens to her in the pilot in this series. And you can see that there's like, they're labeling other characters in here, listing them off, Willa and Gus and Doc Holliday and Bobo Del Rey, and there's a love triangle. Oh my God, that's going to be sexy and exciting. And you can see up here, it's the tone is Justified meets Vampire Slayer.
So hold on, is this a show you're doing?
No, it's not. It's just a pitch deck that I have, and as a sample. So I wanted to just share with you, because look, they're not easy to come by.
Yeah.
The few people that we all have the same ones, but here's the backstory. You can see the deck is beautiful. There's more backstory, and then I'm just kind of going to quickly go through more about Winona and her character.
It's pretty heavy on the text.
This actually has more text than this might be the actual pitch that they actually say. Some of them don't have, it's more visual and they don't have as much, but like, yeah, here it goes all the way to Winona's journey. Each week, what's going to happen. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling fast. I hope you guys are. The love triangle. I tried to send the attachment, but I couldn't. Sergeant Enon Dolls, Doc Holliday. So here's all the characters. This is a really good looking deck, right? Yeah. Ours don't look like this. Winona's crew, because it's like, this is professionally done. Like somebody probably paid for this to be done by a company. Other allies reoccurring, and then supernatural elements in it. So you're getting more about what the show is, what the demons are. How many pages is this? The Black Badge Division, the gun, the tone, right? Mythology or the rules of the Earp curse. This is amazing. Did this get sold?
Wow, this is pretty
more thorough, I would say, than others we've seen.
Way more. Why Winona stays and why she fights.
Yeah.
Badass image at the end, right? So that kind of just gives you like, that's a killer one. And I've seen a couple. I think the one for Stranger Things is really killer. Yeah. But like when we used to go around and pitch in person, it would just be us two, and sometimes we'd have the headshots of like what the characters, like actors, and this is who would play Jim or Nancy, whatever. And then you would have we would just be talking and having our pitch. And now because of Zoom, I think we're always going to be expected to have visuals.
Yeah, just to show what an animated deck can look like. The irony is that I think that Winona Earp deck is longer than mine, but like
that's beautiful.
I had original artwork created. I paid money for this, and most of this is original art.
It shows, Max.
Incredible.
Wow.
And my graphic designer was amazing, but I needed this style of artwork because that's the style that's going to be flowing through the whole show. Like that's for animation, it's almost always so artist driven. And so you need to then find people that can, mimic this type of artwork. But so
really great.
Pitch decks are important, but don't, it's tricky because you don't want to overload somebody, but you also need to get everything up front. And, so there's a balance.
Yeah.
But that's great. I'd like to watch that Winona Earp show.
Me too. Somebody said that they've seen it.
They've seen an episode. I saw that in the
it's on Sci-Fi. Okay, guys.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Very
Cool. Cool.
So the deck
Well,
works. guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. A huge thank you to both of you for doing this.
Of
Thank
course.
you for having us, Max. This is
Yeah.
Anytime. Thank you.